Hello everyone, I'm Mohammad Haidarikha, an HR director and business developer passionate about building organizations where people and strategy thrive. Today I have the distinct pleasure of hosting two esteemed experts from Singapore, Avni Martin and Helen Eber, for a vital discussion on driving sustainable success. We'll be delving into the core of growth from within, leadership, culture, and organizational change. Join us to gain actionable insights that will transform your approach to talent and leadership. Hello, my dear Avni and Helen. What are you doing? Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and welcome to Talent Talks.
Thank you,
Thank
Mohammed,
you.
for hosting us. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's my honor to have you here. We're gonna speak a lot about, of course, you're gonna speak a lot about organizational change, growth, and this kind of things. And we want to share great points to, let all of the employers and employees have better personal development within their organizations. Avni, please have an introduction of yourself, if it is possible.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Avni Martin. I'm an ICF, which is International Coaching Federation, master certified coach. And I've recently published a book called Happy Ever After with Penguin. The full title is Happy Ever After, Transform Your Leaders, Teams, and Organizations with a Happy System. And I work with leaders and entrepreneurs to teach them coaching skills and transform their teams and cultures and help them be the best versions of themselves. So over to you, Mohammed. Thank you very much for having me here.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much. Helen, tell us about yourself, more about yourself, and let's enlighten the audience.
Sure. So my name's Helen Eber. I'm an HR professional with over 20 years experience. And a couple of years ago, I left my corporate role and set up my own business as a fractional HR support. So I work with different companies depending on their needs, sometimes on longer term engagements and sometimes more on a project basis to provide senior HR advice and support. And I'm just about to start my coaching qualification with Avni, so that I can build out how I support line managers and leadership in organizations, to better provide their teams with the right kind of support.
That's great for all of the people who gonna work, for you, with you, and alongside you. That's great. Thank you so much for being here, Helen. I've got 9 questions for both of you experts from HR and coaching eras. The first question for Avni. Dear Avni, what early experience shaped the way you think about people, growth, and transformation?
So, Mohammed, as a child, when I was growing up, I constantly saw and observed people, and I noticed that people are often reacting to and coping with life based on who they are inside rather than what's happening with their external circumstances. So, external circumstances can happen, but people were always reacting in respect of who they are deep inside of themselves. So, I realized that it's less about what's happening on the outside, more about what's happening on the inside. And so I often saw that people who are seemingly calm suddenly become very aggressive, or people who seem to be confident, then they're losing their confidence at times. And so that made me realize that, yes, it really is all about our internal stories, our internal hopes, our internal fears that shapes our external world. And then later on in my life, as I joined organizations, after graduating, I started noticing that whatever's happening in the organization, it's less about the systems, processes, and strategy. It's more about the leaders who are executing it, because who they are being. So they might actually show what they're doing on the external side, that we are doing ABC, but actually who they are being deep inside actually really shapes the culture of the organization, the performance, and the outcomes. And now I work with leaders and teams across many different countries, and I see the same patterns repeat themselves. So yeah, that's what really shaped my understanding of people growth and transformation.
Wow, wow. So great. Thank you so much. Question number two for Helen. Helen, you have led HR teams in large global organizations. What is one defining, experience that reshaped how you see people, development, and organizational health?
Yeah, I think for me, it hasn't necessarily been one defining moment, but it's lots of small insights that you get every time you roll out a program, every time you design something new, every time you see a team change or a leadership change. It just always reminds me that people are always going to surprise you. They will never all consistently act, especially in a large global organization across multiple markets. They will never consistently act the way that you hope they might when you roll out something new. And so trying to think about actually who are the people that we're rolling this out to? What are the things that they really care about? Because I think sometimes the temptation when you've worked for a long time on a change or an organizational redesign, you want everybody to understand how much work went into it, but that's not what they really need to know. They really need to know what's the impact for them. And so trying to keep that message simple and trying to link it to the business outcomes is really, really critical. And it's easy to forget when you're deep in the weeds of the work, actually just to kind of really take a step back and think about your audience. So I think it's kind of hard fought knowledge from many years of rolling things out and then things not going quite how you expected them to in different locations. Gives you a lot of insight into how to maybe manage things a little bit differently.
And do you enjoy it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the great thing about HR is nothing ever works twice the same way. So you always have to think on your feet and you always have to be thinking about something new or what you're going to do differently.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. Thank you so much. Back to Avni. When a leader wants to transform their team, where do you, invite them to begin?
The journey basically begins with the leader themselves, who we are deep inside of ourselves. So we actually have, I think in my book, I've shared all about the happy system where we start with who you are yourself. So why for yourself? Because when the leader shifts, of course, everything else shifts. And then we help them clarify who the leader is, what is it that they really want, what are the organizational values and all the team's values, and what are they really trying to achieve. And we look at the why for yourself element, where we start to look at the entire team as a collective to see who are they being amongst themselves, what kind of interrelationships do they have, where are they right now at this particular moment, and where do they actually want to go in terms of their dynamics. So what kind of a purpose do they have? So then the next part goes to the P for purpose. So why for yourself is a part of the happy system. We start from the back end, why for yourself, and then we go to the P for purpose, where we look at what exactly is their purpose, where are they trying to head to, what kind of relationships do they want, what kind of communication do they want, what kind of dynamics do they want, and what is their purpose behind it, what will it do for the organization or their department if they did make that shift. And then we start to look at if this is where we are and this is where we want to be. So, i.e., if right now people are not being collaborative, but we want them to be collaborative, then we start to look at the deeper reasons why they're being the way they're being. So we start to then look at the P for perception part. So what exactly is happening within the people individually and collectively in their dynamics at a perspective level, at the mindset level, the things that we can't see, but we can feel them. And we see them being enacted in their behaviors. So we start to look at the perception part of it to see what part of their mindset, what part of their perception do they really need to shift, and not just looking at it from a perspective of, okay, we've identified that we want to be more collaborative, or we've identified that it's, all for one for all, right? Not just identifying, but actually creating that shift, creating that safety, creating that trust within the teams to move from that untrusting environment to trusting. So what kind of exercises can we do? What kind of things do we need to change in our teams to enable that kind of growth? Enable that kind of a shift. So we look at that, and that usually takes some time for people to actually shift their behaviors. We monitor the changes in the behaviors and looking at those measurable outcomes, at how are we going to measure that trust? How are we going to measure that collaboration? And then through their actions. And then we look at how do we then turn those A for actions from the happy system into long-term sustainable habits. And what could possibly get in the way, what could derail them, and how can we really help them get to where they want to be. So to answer your question, Mohammed, it all starts with who you are as a person and
Do they
who the
accept
team is.
usually?
That's a really interesting question, because sometimes you get called in to change the team dynamics when it is more like a tick box exercise, that they don't actually really want to shift and change. Now, Helen, you must have seen that as well happening in many, many situations, that they say that they want to change, but they don't actually want to change, or it's just lip service, or it's just something that they show because they need to or want to, or for political reasons. And so to answer your question, do they accept it? Yes, if they really mean it and they really want to shift and change. And that's one of the things that we do try our best to establish really clearly, that how much do they really want it, and how sincere are the people who really want this shift. And is there any resistance, etc. And so, yeah, Helen, what are your thoughts on this? What's your experience of this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's like any kind of healthy habit, right? They want that outcome without maybe making the changes.
Yeah,
So I think it's are they willing to do the things that will make the change, or do
yeah,
they quite like their sort of processes and their policies and their exceptions
yeah,
as they are? And then that's really what it boils down to, is how open are they? I have to
yeah,
say with my clients, I've been really pleased. Like in most circumstances, I've sometimes gone in a little dubious about how willing they are to change, but they've all been very willing to
yeah,
listen, to take on board new ideas, to explore different things. And I think that's critical for leadership nowadays.
yeah, exactly.
Because it's a
So,
prestige. Nowadays, it's a prestige. Everyone is talking about change, transformation, having a better situation, but they do not like it from the bottom of their hearts, you know? That's why I asked this question.
Mm-mm.
yeah. And I'll add that, over the years, I've seen a mixed bag of outcomes, meaning where people really want to shift and change, and they do it. And there
Mm.
has been one or two times that I recall very clearly, where I've gone in, where the leadership team says that we want to make this shift. And then when we start doing the work, it turns out, it's often through drawings, when we are drawing that where are we today as a team and where do we want to be? And when the drawings are done in an anonymous way, that's when the truth comes out, that the team
Mm.
feels that the real issue is with the leadership. And I've seen lots of interesting drawings that have come through from one particular team, where they drew things like there is a boat, there is water, and everyone is in the water. Just the two leaders are in the boat. And so, I mean, that says a lot. Or they have shown a tiger or a panther, some kind of an animal, but it's blind, which basically they're trying to say that the leader has got lots of blind spots.
Mm.
So I have come across some of those interesting cases over the years, and that happened twice. But yeah, but generally, Mohammed, as Helen said, people are very willing, very accepting, very
Mm.
excited. Yes.
That's great, and brilliant answer. Thank you so much, Avni. Back to you, Helen. When a company brings you in to improve culture or performance, what's the first thing you look for beneath the surface?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I look for is alignment. So looking at the business strategy, looking at what's in place now, like how aligned are those things? Or where is there perhaps disconnect? Like what is it that's blocking them getting from the culture that they have now to the culture that they say they want? And how clear are they on what that is? Like what that looks like? Sometimes people use a lot of words to describe a culture, but how will you know when you've actually achieved that? What will it look like? What will it feel like? And really trying to get to an understanding of what difference do they think it will make. There are lots of words that can describe a culture. Transparency is obviously a very popular one. Performance oriented, words like that. But what does that mean in your business? I think
We are
that's what,
family. Many say we are family, and but they
yeah.
fire all of the people, and the toxic culture they are presenting is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it really depends on what difference do you think it's going to make? What are you really trying to achieve? And how do you articulate what that actually looks like in practice so that you can then align the other things that you're doing to make sure that you're not doing something jarring that people will say, hang on, I thought we wanted this kind of culture. Why are we doing X, Y, Z? That doesn't align.
Yeah, yeah. So, understandable. Thank you so much for sharing that. Back to you, Avni. I mentioned, resistance. What's the unseen resistance that derails transformation the most? And how do you help leaders move from unconscious reaction to conscious response? You're mute. You're mute.
Yes, I just realized that.
Yeah, that's okay.
To move from unconscious responses to conscious ways of being, of course, the first thing is for leaders to value awareness and value the fact that they really want to learn, grow, and develop. And as they start to do that, then of course, the core of resistance often comes from people trying to protect themselves deep inside. It's their internal sense of safety. Egos, I would say, false beliefs also we have deep inside of ourselves, that if I'm seen to be vulnerable, or if I'm seen to accept that there needs to be a change, or that I want to change the way I'm doing something, then I might be seen as being weak, or that I need to or some leaders have this belief that I really need to put a lot of pressure on people to drive performance, rather than really help people get connected to their purpose and come from within to really give their best performance. So there are many false beliefs that people have within themselves, and very often people do fight for their false beliefs deep inside. So this is the unseen, right? You're talking about the unseen, unconscious things that creates resistance. And the interesting thing is that nobody really puts resistance on a table like a silver platter. That, hey, this is my resistance, right?
Yeah.
And
It's
resistance.
somehow awkward to present that.
Of course, exactly. The whole idea of resistance is that it's unseen and it's hidden. It's under the carpet, and people don't see that, but it is there. And I would say that more often than not, it is the fact that people are coming from a sense of protecting their ego, or a sense of safety, or some internal beliefs that they have within themselves. So I think that the moment leaders listen without rushing to fix, the moment leaders accept that really it's not about them, it's about the collective growth, then resistance starts to dissolve.
Wow, thank you so much. What about you, Helen? What forms of resistance do HR leaders see that executives often miss, and what helps shift it?
Yeah, I think the sort of almost the hardest form of resistance, or the most damaging form of resistance, is that kind of passive resistance. People just stop turning up to team calls, they stop putting in discretionary effort, they say they're going to make the changes, but they don't. They sort of slow pedal everything. It's kind of an extension of the quiet quitting trend that we've seen over the last kind of couple of years, I think. And that's the hardest one, because for leaders, it can be quite hard to see. Maybe it's just a difficult economic time. Maybe they're just struggling with a particular system. It's kind of hard to pin it down to a kind of deliberate behavior if it's subtle. But it can be really damaging to organizations to have that kind of lack of motivation, and lack of engagement. So I think that's the most challenging, to kind of surface. And I think the solution to it really is engagement. So making sure that you're very clear with the context for your change. Most people, when they give feedback about a problem, will already have an idea of how they want to solve that problem. So if your solution is not the solution they had in mind, they will not necessarily connect it to the problem. So being really clear with like, this is what you told us about the issues that we have, and this is how we're solving them, is really helpful, I think, to help people contextualize. I think leaders often forget, and HR is prone to this as much as anybody else. When you've been working on something for 6 months, you coming at it, people have not had that 6 months prep time that you have had to get your head around it. So you're often presenting them with a change that they don't feel as ready for as you feel. By the time you launch something, you're, very enthusiastic about it. You're sold that it's the right idea, but you have to bring them along on that journey with you. Now, it doesn't have to take the 6 months that you've had, obviously, but you still need to kind of take a little bit of a step back and make sure that you bring them with you, because otherwise you're kind of sort of dropping something on them that's half sort of done already. And that can be, again, very jarring to people, because even if they thought there was a problem that needed solving, they don't necessarily want to be kind of force fed a solution that they maybe aren't completely on board with. So I think that kind of engagement, clarity of communications, really contextualizing what's the business problem we're working on here, and how is this going to impact you personally, and how will it make things better for you personally, is really, really important.
Wow, great. Do you agree, Avni, with something Helen
Yes.
said?
Yeah, absolutely. So people do need time to catch up, and if the leadership team have been working on some changes and they suddenly implement it on the rest of the people, then of course it takes time for them to catch up. And as Helen says, not necessarily 6 months, but at least some time to bring them into the context of the why. Like, what is the main purpose of this? Why are we doing what we're doing in this change management project? And how do we really bring other people on board so they have that ownership, that agreement that this is what we really want, and also to help them see that this is in my best interest. So every single person needs to see their own personal why in this, like what's in it for me, and that really needs to be communicated from top down. Then they need to translate any big change that's happening on the top into individual people's why. That what's in it for me? How is it going to benefit me? How is it going to impact me? And how do I need to be inside of this to make it successful? And to your earlier point about how do we really help them shift from unconscious to conscious, I was thinking that what will also really help is if people can start noticing their triggers, that what are my internal triggers, my internal assumptions, and my interpretations of other people or what's happening, and the stories I tell myself about all the changes that are going on. And how can I then get either coached, or I can reframe my stories to make it to make it aligned to where the organization's heading. I think
I
that
understand. Next question to you, Avni. What's one outdated belief about leadership that organizations must leave behind, and what mindset is needed to lead in the new era?
I think one of the biggest outdated beliefs is that I need to know it all. Right? I think it's all about, rather than the era of all-knowing leader. Okay, we want to move into a self-knowing leader. So basically, moving the leaders from I need to know it all to I need to know as much as I can about myself. So I think that is one thing that is very outdated, that I need to have all the answers. So we need to encourage leaders to move away from the answers, move into more questioning phase, and not just questioning other people, of course, helping question other people is very important, but I feel like the journey really begins with yourself. Question who you are being, what is really happening with yourself, because when you transform, then everything else transforms around you. Just like Gandhi said, that change begins with yourself first, right? Be the change you want to see. And I think when one person transforms, then absolutely it impacts and touches every single person around them. So I think that's one of the big outdated beliefs.
Why it is too hard to change ourselves?
Why is it hard for us to change ourselves? Because I think we are brought up with this mindset and this model that you have to be right. We are rewarded from birth for being right, and you need to know it, and you're scored for knowing things, right? So you're examined and marked and scored for knowing things, and it's all about what you know. So I think we are brought up with that. Our culture teaches us that. Our parents teach us that. Our education also teaches us that. The interesting thing is that as much as we think we know, if you really think about it, there is so much more that we don't know. If we even put the collective intelligence of all of our humanity and all the people on our world put together, totally put together as one big unit, even that is just not even a grain of sand in comparison to how much more there is to know, right? From a scientific perspective and from every field perspective, every single field perspective. So the universe is so vast and so huge. We know so little about it. So I feel like if we can start teaching young people that as much as we are teaching you to know something, please know that we really don't know. And learn to keep and embrace an open mind about who you are, who other people are. And if there is ever a conflict, or if there is ever something that is not working the way you want it to work, then ask yourself more about what is it that you don't know, what is it that you can find out about another person, rather than sitting there making judgments or making conclusions based on premature, incomplete information. So I think
maybe it's a mistake of God, because he has always told this story that human beings are gifted. You are gifted, and you are appointed to be the best thing uh, and the best creature on earth.
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting point you raise, because I could even say that, okay, it's true. We are very gifted, but it's all about how do we interpret that gift. And we are gifted to be curious. We are gifted to search. We are gifted to invent and innovate and collaborate and be creative. And we're gifted to love and completely be able to shift anything in our world that we really want to. But do we? And how much do we? Right? So it's all about how do we use our gifts. So I think we are gifted. It's just about interpreting it differently.
You are gifted, but you are responsible.
Yeah. Yeah. With power comes responsibility, as Spider-Man says.
Yeah, exactly. Do you agree, Helen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think one of the things that I really enjoy about working in HR is figuring out what somebody's gifts are and which role will they best fit in. And then when you see a team come together because you've managed to help them to find the right people to build that team, that's really rewarding. And so I think everybody is gifted, but all in different ways. And how do you know what works best for you? Where do you best add value? What lights your sort of spark inside? And how do you find that niche for yourself? I think that's, really important.
Yeah, in talent management and talent acquisition, we work on these kind of issues to
Mm-mm.
help both people and the organizations to develop as much as possible. Next question, dear Helen. With AI rising and
Mm.
roles evolving, which human leadership capabilities will become the true differentiators.
Yeah, I think there are a few. So I think self-awareness is a really big one, and Avni's spoken to that a bit already. I think also just really holding boundaries, being able to role model, the culture that you want to see. There's nothing that undermines a culture more than seeing the leadership behave very differently to the culture that they claim to espouse. So being able to role model that sort of intention, um, being able to sort of, the pace of change and the pace of communication now is significantly different, even from when I entered the workplace. Being able to hold some of those boundaries for your team so that they don't have to be on 24/7. That's something that I think AI is never going to do. It's always ready with an answer. It's always ready with some new task. It's always ready with some new work. How do you decide how to prioritize what's urgent and what can wait until tomorrow? What can wait until next week? How do you role model spending time with your family, spending time with your hobbies, you know, being a well-rounded person as opposed to some sort of corporate machine? I think those things are going to be really critical. And then also making the connections. So, I think with all the automation and the AI that we're building into processes, you run the real risk that you've got different agents working on the same process in different areas, or that the process connections don't quite work, that you kind of pick up one process and it runs in one direction, but it doesn't necessarily connect to the next process or to a slightly independent but adjacent process. And really being able to understand that whole environment and make those connections across different departments, across different silos is going to be really important, because if you build within a silo, it will never work smoothly across the piece. So being able to make those human connections that will help you make those system connections, being able to role model, being a well-rounded person and also a good corporate citizen, I think those things are going to be really critical because people want to see that kind of authentic leadership.
Do you like AI?
I like
Do you
AI. I
use
think
it?
it's great as a tool. I was just saying to Avni earlier, I've been using an Excel plugin, ChatGPT enabled Excel plugin for some of my personal stuff. That's great. But I think for me,
What
hybrid
about human
working,
beings? What about us?
well, I can do Excel to a certain extent, but this does a bit that I can't do. I think, but for me, hybrid working and AI are two of the biggest kind of red herrings for performance management. They get blamed a lot for underperformance, and actually, the issue is still performance. Where you work, it's not driving the outcome of your performance. How you manage hybrid working for yourself may well be affecting your performance, but managers need to focus on the outcome. What is it that you needed to do differently to achieve that performance? And then you can decide where you work and how you meet that outcome. Similarly, with AI, there's been a lot in the news about Deloitte repeatedly, it seems, making mistakes in Australia and now in Canada by producing reports using AI. But the problem is not that they used AI, the problem is they used it badly. And it was very obvious that they used AI. If they were using it well, no one would have ever known. So I do think it's really important that managers focus on the performance and not on the tooling that supports the performance. Making sure people have the right tools for sure, but making sure people use them well. That's part of how you manage performance. You can't just blame the tool, and then say, oh, well, everyone's using too much AI. Like AI is going to be used. People are going to use it. Make sure they're using it properly. Make sure they're using it responsibly. Make sure they're using it ethically. It's too late to stem the tide and stop it now.
Wow, brilliant. What about you, Avni? Do you agree with AI?
I love AI because I think it's an unstoppable force. This is going to change the way we operate, the way we educate, the way our world is running and working. Recently, I heard that Jeff Bezos is creating a company where he's using AI, not just to do the kind of work that we do. He's using AI to completely shift and transform how engineering is done, basically getting AI to think about engineering, like manufacturing. And so, like right now, we have cameras and cars and whatnot. But can you imagine if AI starts thinking how the camera should function or how the car should function? Right? And how machineries need to be designed, and how fast will it think from an engineering perspective if you train it? So, and how fast are things going to develop? And then it's not just thinking that he's doing; he's apparently creating a whole system where it can actually produce, like at a mechanical level. So I think AI is 100% an unstoppable force. We have to, of course, and I would say we should embrace it, and it's going to benefit our humanity to embrace it. But it also, to Helen's point earlier, it brings to our awareness that we really need to then be even more conscious about our humanity. So AI is going to do so much of what a CFO can do, or even a CEO can do. Some of the decision making, some of the thinking, some of the strategic research, and figuring out what really needs to happen. So AI can do a lot now. Then in that case, what about the humans? Right, and this is where what is really in the capability of the humans and our humanity, which is to connect well with people, to understand people, to really use our awareness to bring out the best in ourselves and other people. I think so. So the game of awareness then really comes into play at this point, even more so than before. I think that could be the strategic competitive advantage moving forward for leaders.
Thank you so much. The last question for both of you to discuss. If leaders could make just one shift tomorrow, that would create the biggest ripple of growth across their organization, what would it be?
Helen, you want to
I
go?
think
How would
if
you start?
oh,
Sorry,
It's
Helen, you
okay.
wanted to
Helen,
say.
go for it. Yeah,
yeah, no. I think I think for me, the biggest shift that a leader can make is that self-awareness point, and then really listening to their teams to understand what obstacles are getting in their team's way, and how do they help them remove those obstacles to be able to perform at their best for the business.
yeah. Completely echo that, Helen. Absolutely, 100% echo that. I think the biggest growth I think organizations can have is if they can help people really become aware of what's really happening in their internal world. Mohammed, there's not enough taught at schools, colleges, universities, MBAs, or in leadership programs about what makes us who we are, what drives our behavior, what drives our thoughts, feelings, mindset. None of those things
I
are
think
actually.
I think we study a lot, but we do not learn at all.
That's interesting, yeah, that we study but we don't learn. And I would also even say that the right kind of studying around it is not necessarily presented because we learn math, science, English, whatever languages, we learn so many things in our lives. And whilst they are all useful, the one thing that's extremely useful is knowing how do we use this in the best possible way? How do we use, what our speech in the best possible way, our actions and our thoughts in the best possible way? But we don't get taught how to manage that or how to have mastery over our thoughts or our behaviors. And yet, that is one big determining factor that determines the success of us personally and our organizations. So, I think the biggest game changer we can have is creating more and more awareness about our internal landscape to really understand what drives our behavior so that we can become more conscious externally. And I feel like that entire game of self-awareness isn't really a soft skill to have. I think it really is a hard competitive advantage that will strategically set organizations apart if they prioritize it.
Hmm.
Ella, do you think it is easy to do that, as Avni mentioned, in the
No,
organizations?
I think it's not easy, but I do think it's necessary. And there are lots of tools. I mean, to the point around AI, there are now lots of tools where you can democratize at least a certain amount of coaching and self-awareness. There are AI coaches that you can use. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend them at a very senior level, but as a sort of entry level point, as a first exploration, when you've done your sort of first kind of strengths finder or MBTI or one of these kind of tests to just explore a little bit more about what makes you tick or what other people's perception of you might be and how your perception of them might perhaps be based on your views rather than their behavior or your interpretation of it. Those kind of toolings, I think, can be really democratized now and could be real game changers in organizations. Similarly, training internal coaches so that you don't have to continue to use a lot of external support. You can train your teams internally to provide some coaching or some mentoring and advice, I think can also be really beneficial. So some of these interventions don't have to cost a huge amount of money, but they do have to be well thought through and delivered quite carefully.
What about the benefits of people? We fight for our benefits.
Yeah, I think benefits is another landscape that's shifting completely. I mean, the sort of cost of medical inflation, and insurance inflation, I mean, different parts of the world is crazy. So being able to understand how you make benefits more flexible so that people can tailor them really to what they need. Different types of families. We see people with children in different countries to the one they're in. How do you get an insurance coverage that can cover the whole family? Um, you know, Different types of blended families as well, or perhaps responsibility for elderly parents that typically wouldn't have been covered under a benefits plan. There's a lot of changes in society that are creeping into the workplace. And I do think it's important as well for workplaces to be thoughtful about how much is my responsibility as an employer and how much am I going to give you the tools to figure out how to solve this for yourself, whether that's some sort of advice, whether that's a lump sum and you can buy your own thing that works for you, like however you want to kind of tailor that. But I think there has to be a line in the sand at some point as well. You know, as you mentioned before, your employer is not your family. So there is only a certain amount of responsibility that an employer can take. The employer is also not, in most cases, although it may be in some, the government. Um, so also has a limited amount of influence on policy. So, you know, sort of navigating that, it cannot be all the employee's responsibility or all the employer's responsibility or all the government's responsibility. There's a blending of, and I think we're seeing a change in the balance of that as well.
I see, I see. Um, Before we wrap up, what would be the last suggestion, Avni, from you to the employers and employees to change and transform better?
Feel that growth begins when we grow ourselves within. So everything that we do internally reflects outside. So I'm a very strong believer of that. And yeah, thank you for asking.
You're welcome. Helen, what about you? What would be the last suggestion?
I think communicate, and then communicate some more. Like, people don't know what you need if you don't tell them, and people don't understand where the restrictions are or where the sort of constraints are if you don't explain that clearly. So I think, you know, sometimes I feel like there's a lot of communication in organizations, but never quite the communication that people need. So really getting that balance right between communicating and listening between the employer and the employee is really important.
Active listening, yeah?
Yeah.
Because most of the people they pretend they are listening, but they do not listen at all.
Or you might feel like they didn't listen because they didn't do anything about it. I think sometimes, again, that's a communication point. Like, I heard you, and this is why I can't make the changes that you requested, can be as important as making a change in and of itself.
Yeah, so inspiring. I always say communication and networking. It really helps the organizations grow as much as possible, as better as before. And this is something that most of the employers and employees are after. And I hope they listen to you both, great experts of coaching and HR. Thank you so much. Is there anything before we end up?
No, just
You
thank
want to
you so
add?
much, Mohammed. Thank you for the
Thank you
opportunity.
so much for being here on Talent Talks, and it was a real pleasure to meet you. Two great experts from 10,000 kilometers away from Tehran, and thank you so much. But our hearts are very close to each other, and your thoughts will change many organizations. This is something that I believe within my heart.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Mohammed. And thank you very much, Helen. Great exploring this with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great time, great year, great day, great months, and great life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.